Howdy tubes, welcome back to the Zach Life. So we're finally done on the inside for now, and what I want to get back to now is to get in the truck, start working on making the truck ready to run, ready to go down the road. This video here is I want to install and work on the air system and the air hose, or more simply than that, all of the air lines and fuel lines that run down the coach frame. So this is the type of airline we're running. This is just plain DOT plastic air brake line. I'll run that for both air and fuel. I plan on hooking the fuel lines up in this video. Touch briefly the next video. I want to plan on actually making the truck run, get the engine running. We're going to talk specifically about the engine that's in this truck, kind of why it's cool, why it's outdated, why it's antique, why I wanted it maybe. Talk some specifics about what does make it unique. Try to get it running. If I get some exhaust stacks by then, we may try to do the exhaust. That may have to come later, I don't know. Anyway, back to this video. I'm going to take and walk you through, starting with a compressor, all through the air system. Now, I've touched a little bit on air systems when we talked about the generator, but basically we're going to start over here. So this is the air compressor. It's driven off the gear train of the engine driven. This line up here at the top would be the output. This has got an oil line that comes in the back, goes back to the oil filter, and then it's got coolant lines. This would be coolant coming in, and then it snakes back around back to the water pump on the other side. Anyway, this is the output of the compressor. We'll follow where it goes in just a second. This right here is called a governor. This is what actually controls the air pressure, turns the compressor off and on. The compressor has got a set of valves, not that unlike an engine. I mean, they're completely different, but same idea. 2 valves per cylinder, intake and exhaust. This is a 2-cylinder compressor. The intake valves of the compressor have got a thing called an unloader valve under them, and it's basically not a valve. It's like an air cylinder, and the air cylinder holds open the intake valve. So when the governor senses pressure from the tank through a line we'll show you in just a minute, above its opening point, say 120, 125 psi, it supplies air from that sensing line to the unloader valves, and this holds the intake valves open, and then the compressor basically sits there and freewheels. Right here is what's referred to as the wet tank. Now, this truck does not have an air dryer, and most trucks that you run across do have an air dryer. An air dryer is superior in all ways, but this truck didn't have one, and I'm not going to put one on it. So this line here is basically the sensor line that goes back to the governor we showed you. This line here, which is a brittle hard line, and I'm going to replace later, but I don't have a piece of Strataflex, is the output from the compressor. So the compressor, which is just off camera behind the air filter there, pumps air into this tank. This senses it, and when the pressure in this tank reaches 125 psi or whatever, something about that, the governor will kick off the air compressor. Typically, there is nothing is supplied from this tank. There's no brakes, there's no valves, there's no air seats, there's nothing supplied from this tank. Now, some people will do that, and I don't see a problem with it, but they'll run like a PTO or something, off of it. But typically in OEM situations you won't see this. Now, as I said, a lot of trucks have a dryer, and this is basically hooked in the same way as a dryer, with the difference being it'll have a line from the governor that tells the dryer that when the compressor kicks off, and the dryer will sneeze any water that's accumulated in it. This is just simply got a valve here at the back, and every day you're supposed to open that valve and drain the water and oil and condensate out. Just basically like a dryer, except you've got to do it manually. So out of this tank, you have got a couple of lines. And let me spin you around here, and I'm going to show you where these go. Now, they connect right back here in the back. You just can't see them. Alright, so here's the 2 air tanks that are going on this truck. Now, you've got 2 tanks because you basically got 2 different systems. You've got a primary and you've got a secondary air system. The primary air system on the truck basically runs everything except the front brakes, and the secondary system runs only the front brakes. Now, the air comes from either the wet tank on this truck or from a dryer through a check valve into both of these tanks. So when you start the truck up, the truck airs up the dryer or the wet tank, or on some trucks both, and then airs up the primary and secondary air system tank. Now if you have a failure, you know, your tank blows a hole in it, or if you have a, you know, an airline ripped off or something, and you have a catastrophic failure of the primary or secondary air system, the system that is damaged has got a check valve that doesn't allow the air to travel out of it, back through the dryer or whatever, and into the damaged system. So that if you have a catastrophic failure of one system or the other system stays aired up. Now the compressor can't keep adding it up. You know, you have a very limited supply. The only air you have is in the tank. But this gives you the ability to stomp on the brake and stop the truck, you know, if it be just only with the front brakes. Now it's a little bit more complicated than this. We'll go over when you get into the parking brake system, because the parking brake system can actually use either system along with the trailer supply. We'll go over that in a minute. Now on most trucks, this one included, the air tanks are used as somewhat as the air manifold. So you've got air coming in, and then you've got all these different ports where air comes out, and this goes to the different brakes and the different, you know, whatever. So the way these are going to be installed, I'm going to have to not use these as an air manifold, and the reason being is they're going on the outside of the frame. We'll come over there and show you in a minute, but there's no way to get an air line from the outside of the frame to the inside of the frame. So what I'm going to have to do is drill a couple of holes in the frame. I'm going to run these 1/2-inch steel nipples through them, weld them out in the frame, and then screw a T or whatever onto the nipple, and this is going to be the way the air gets basically through the frame. Now I'm going to get away with only putting 3 nipples through the frame. That's basically going to be one supply line from the wet tank, goes through the frame, through a T, and then that T goes into both check valves. It'll be on the end of the tanks, and then I'll have a primary coming through and a secondary coming through. When they come into the inside of the frame, they'll be teed off again to all the things they need to go to. It's going to be hard for me to video this. Basically, I'm going to get under here, drill the holes, weld the nipples in, mount the air tanks, and we'll catch you here maybe tomorrow when I get that done. And we'll get under there and start running airlines. Alright, bear with me here. I'm laying on my back and it's hard to get the phone far enough away to get a vantage point. So I've got the tanks mounted. I mounted them with a piece of 2x2 angle iron, and then use the factory U-bolts. Primary is outboard. The secondary air tank is the one inboard. So this line here is the one that comes from the wet tank. It goes through a nipple welded in the frame to a T, and goes to the inlet through the check valve to this side and around here to the other side. And then the outlets of both tanks, there's only one, makes a loop, goes through the frame, and same with the other side, and then through the frame to a set of T's. So this will be the secondary tank. Both of these go forward. One line goes to the relay valve, and one line goes to the foot valve. We'll explain that a little bit more in a second. Same with the secondary. Excuse me, the primary. You can't hardly see it here. Here we go. One line goes to the relay valve for the back brakes, and the other line goes to the brake valve. Also, while I've got you under here, I've got the umbilical, the run down the truck frame done. It's all wire tied together. It looks pretty good. It sits in these looms. I'm planning on getting some large hose wrap and making a few laps around this as a whole. But this is the last time I'm getting under here with a camera, so there you go. Alright, so this is going to be kind of hard to show you, but this here is the actual foot valve. As you can kind of see here, this is the valve that is actuated when you actually step on the brake pedal. Now this valve has got 4 ports.
So I described this poorly. I'm going to try again. So this valve has got 8 ports, not 4. Now this is 2 valves made together. It's an upper and a lower part of the valve, and these 2 upper and lower parts aren't connected in any way other than mechanically through the brake pedal. I mean, they're made together, but there's nothing pneumatically connecting them. They work independently. Now, the valves, each upper and lower valve has got 2 inputs and 2 outputs, and these inputs and outputs are connected together. It's just 2 different places to hook up to the valve. And Peterbilt uses this as somewhat of a manifold in that the air comes in the back of the valve and the inputs and out the front of the inputs, if that makes any sense. The air just passes through the valve and then goes up to the truck manifold, and that's where the cab of the truck gets its air supply. I know it's kind of confusing. Also, if you don't know, this valve is a graduated valve, so the harder that you push on the brake pedal or the farther you push it down, the more air pressure it has on its outputs.
2 come out the front, 2 out the back. You can see one here coming out the side. There's another one coming out the side that goes to the back, and 2 on this side. This valve is actually 2 valves that are not connected other than mechanically, and that's the top 4 ports and the bottom 4 ports. The front and the back set of ports are the supply lines, and so air actually just passes through. So like the bottom half is the secondary, and I'm not sure why it had a bigger line of the truck. It may just because that's what I had when I plumbed it, and this would be the primary. So air comes in the back from the tanks, directly from the tanks, lines we just saw, and they come up these couple lines and supply the air to what's needed in the truck. There's a blue line here that goes to the left, that goes to the front axle. There's one right back there you can see that makes I hope you can see that actually makes a 90 and goes back. That goes to the back axle. And then there is another one off this side. I'm just going to give up, and it goes to the trailer brakes, and we'll explain that in just a second. Alright, so we're under the front end of the truck. This valve here is called a relay valve. There's one on the front and one on the back. They work the same. They're kind of look different. But this line right here is air supplied directly. This is the line that goes back to the T at the frame that brings full pressure air, full bore through the 5/8 green hose from the secondary air tank. Of course, the primary goes to the back and the secondary goes to the front.
Quick recap. So we've got a compressor that fills up the wet tank that pumps air into the primary and secondary tanks on the truck. These 2 lines from the tanks comes through the frame, through a set of T's. One side of the T goes to either the back or the front relay valve, and the other side of the T's of the primary and secondary tank go to the foot valve. Out of the foot valve comes 2 lines, one that goes to the front relay valve, one to the back relay valve. And this line gives a pressure signal from the foot valve to the relay valve. And so the relay valve's pressure output will be the same as the output of the foot valve. But the reason for the relay valve is that you don't have to have a high volume of air travel through the foot valve to your brake chambers. The relay valve does that for you. It's the one that actually controls the high volume flow of air. Also, when you release the foot valve, the air doesn't have to travel from the brake cans back to the foot valve. It's able to be blown off through the little rubber deal in the bottom of the relay valve.
But anyway, it comes out the bottom and goes to both axles. So the air supply comes up from the foot valve up to a manifold in the back of the dash. The primary air system, the air system that works the back brakes, runs basically everything up here. Your brake saver, the trailer brakes, the differential lock, all this stuff. Now the gauge here has got 2 needles, one for the primary and one for the secondary air system. I'm not sure which one's white, which one's orange. There's a white and orange needle there. But these 2 air systems come over to these 2 valves, and you've got a parking brake valve and you've got a trailer air supply valve. Each of these valves has got a set of check valves to supply both of them, and they take air. They're supplied by whichever air system has the higher pressure. You know, they're coming through a couple of check valves. These two valves both require 60 psi to stay pushed in. Now you can tell there's no air right now, so if you push this valve in, it simply pops out. Now I've got some air building in the tanks. It's just hooked up to shop air. You can see it's up to about 40, and these valves require at least 60 psi to stay kicked in. Also, this truck's got what's known as a wigwag, and so when we get up to 60 or 70 pounds, this thing will stay up when you push it up. Alright, now we're up to 70, so when we push this in, it'll stay. When the pressure gets down below 60, if you have a failure, this will pop out. I don't have these put on. And set the parking brake. If you look right down the frame, I actually can't see it in the camera. I'll see if I can point to it. Anyway, that's the quick release that's that's supplied from the yellow knob, the parking brake knob in the cab, and tees off, comes out of either end of it and goes to each axle to supply air to the brake biscuits to release the brakes. And all that does is when you release the brakes, instead of the air having to travel back through this line back to the valve in the cab, it just blows it off down there and goes psh. So there's a valve right here on the steering column, and 99% of the trucks, this valve is what works the trailer brakes independent of the tractor brakes. Now on this truck, the trailer brake valve is actually over here. This valve controls the hydraulic brake saver, sort of like Jake brakes we talked about before. You've got a couple more gauges up here. This is the retarder air pressure. When we move this valve down, I know the steering wheel's in the way, it supplies air to the retarder and kicks it in. And this valve is the application gauge. Depending on how hard you hit the brakes, after we get this hooked up, it'll show you how much air pressure you're actually applying to the brakes. So this here is called the tractor protection valve. And what this valve is several different valves all made together. We'll explain. It's sort of in a cheap universal package. And so we've got a line here. This is the trailer air supply from the trailer air supply valve that's in the dash.
That's the valve right under the parking brake valve that didn't have the red knob installed. It's just a stub sticking out on the dash.
That valve sends air right to this port. This port goes right through the center and out this here. You can see right through this valve. These two lines are the actual two lines that go to the trailer. This would be the tractor supply and the trailer supply and the trailer service brakes. So you supply air here, it goes right through here, it airs the tanks up on the trailer. This is supplied from a valve. Let's get in here, I'll show it to you. Now there's a valve right under here, and I'm not sure exactly what the name of this valve actually is, but what it does is you've got air supply coming from your foot valve when you hit the brake pedal, and an air supply coming over here from the trailer hand valve. And what this valve does is it outputs the higher air pressure of the two. So if you hit the brakes or if you pull down on the brake handle, whichever one is depressed harder to higher pressure, it will supply the higher pressure. So this is a supply from that valve we just looked at. And of course the pressure in this line is equal to the greater of the two, either by the handbrake handle or the foot valve. Now this small line here, I'll show you in just a second, but it's a small line that goes back up, and this is actually what the application gauge reads from, because this will be the, like I say, the highest pressure either from the brake pedal or from the hand valve. Now what's so cool about this valve here is that when you don't have air supplied to this, when this is not pressured up above 60 psi, it shuts off between these two ports. So this is effectively blocked, so you don't have an air leak when you hit your brake pedal out your, out your trailer gland hand if you don't have a trailer. The other thing that's cool about it is this is actually a quick release. So when you're on the brakes with the trailer and you let off the brakes, the air in that line doesn't have to travel back through here, back through the valve, up to the foot valve and out the foot valve. It's actually exhausted all out right here. Alright, so right back there it is. I don't have the lines that go back to the trailer hooked up. I don't have the correct connections, correct fittings to hook them up. I can deal with that later. Alright, so now the brake application gauge shows when you hit the pedal. Also, this one has got a hose loose, but it still effectively will work. So the next quick little thing I'm going to do is change this brake can. This doesn't have a pin in it, and I think that's one of the reasons the DOT exists. This was driven all the way from California back here with only one front brake. But I'm going to go ahead and change these cans just because I put all the ones on the back. Might as well have everything new.
So I already got the hose pulled off, and I broke the nuts and the clevis loose. And what I'm doing here, I went over this in a previous video. I don't remember which one it was, but I'm taking the slack adjuster and adjusting it in so that it makes more slack in the brakes. And this is so that I'll be able to actually pull the slack adjuster way forward to get it out of the way and to be able to get the clevis and stuff off. I should have went over the brake adjustment here, and I didn't. I just didn't really think of it. I do have a previous video where kind of talk about how these worked. I don't remember which one it was, but anyway. All right, got the new one. These rods come yay so long, and I just put it in the chop saw, cut it off to the same length as the old one. I'm not sure what this was, therefore I've determined I don't need it. I'm going to remove it. That original hose was actually a hydraulic hose. I don't know why people do that, it's stupid. But this is a proper actual air brake hose. I think you can use this or Strataflex, which I used a lot, but these are already made up and cheaper. Well, I guess I'm going to finish this video up. I appreciate you watching. Hopefully the next video will be actually working on the truck engine, getting the truck engine to run. I want to talk about sort of its legacy and what made it unique, what makes it cool, the reasons I wanted it, yada yada yada. It's going to be sort of a hodgepodge of videos. I started videoing talking about the engine a couple of months ago. I've got several segments and stuff, but anyway, I'll put that together and we'll catch you next time. I appreciate you watching, and as I said, I'll catch you on the next one. Probably have to put a Adel clamp or something up here to keep that off a spring. But there we go. I'm going to do the next one. Actually, I'm going to go sit in the house and cool off and then do the next one.